Hey everyone, welcome to Lead Gen in the Wild. I'm very excited to be talking with Dominick Cabal. Dom is our director of marketing here at Llama Lead Gen, so I'm super pumped to get into a great convo with you.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. So we know that omni-channel marketing is so important for all of our clients. Some of our smaller clients, they of course don't have the budgets, unfortunately, to do omni-channel marketing. They might only be on, one or two platforms. Others, they do have the budgets. Obviously, let's say budget non-permitting. Let's say you have unlimited budget. What are some of the best channels that B2B businesses should be on, in your opinion? And what have you seen work really well for, some of our clients?
Yes. So the best channels for B2B brands, obviously this changes by industry, this changes by the products that they're selling, but typically at a very high level, I see that Google Ads or paid search in general is a good B2B channel for all of the brands. I see that LinkedIn is a good awareness and middle of the funnel channel for a lot of B2B brands. And more often these days, I'm seeing that AI SEO, geo is getting put into the mix as a lot of people are using LLMs and ChatGPT specifically, or that being the top of the list to basically search for solutions that they need. Something like that.
Nice. And how do you, a lot of our clients, I feel like it's a challenge for them to really put all of the pieces together unless they have, a lot of our clients, they have savvy marketers on their team, and we love working with those types of companies. But walk me through how we piece together omni-channel marketing efforts for them. How do we get that combined glue from search, from LinkedIn, from SEO?
Yeah. Well, first of all, from a people perspective, I want to make sure that the right people are attached to the right project. So as the attribution guy, get out of my way, essentially, or nicely said, don't put too many cooks in the kitchen. Creative people, do your thing. Media people, do your thing. Analytics tracking people, do your thing. But from a omni-channel perspective, it's pretty muddy in terms of tracking, attribution, even things that used to be simple as, hey, what's my cost per lead? What's my ROAS? What's my sales numbers? All of those seem to get muddy when we're crossing systems. And of course, each of the big platforms, Bing, Google, Meta, LinkedIn, Snapchat, whatever, the LLMs, all of them have their own reporting tools, and they want to seem as good in the eyes of the brand as they can be. And I often don't trust those numbers. And so when we look at the entire funnel, a digital marketer wants to track every metric along that funnel. They want to track how many people saw my ad, tofu, how many people engaged and clicked on my ad in the middle, mofu, people who got to my site, and ultimately who booked a call, who became a sales lead, who became a marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, and ultimately made a purchase. If information was full, transparent, all the data connectors were working well, we could get those numbers. But based on all of the things that I said prior, the discrepancies between each of those steps and between each of those systems is often muddy, wrong, doesn't make sense, overcounting, undercounted. Therefore, I like to take a two-pronged approach. On the tactical side, if the question was, hey, what system do I look at in order to see what's working? I say, with all these multiple sources of truth, just go to the end. Like, what's your CRM? What is your system that you're using to essentially track dollars? That's often HubSpot, Salesforce, some sort of CRM platform. Try to make that as clean and as data connected as possible. And whether that's tapping into the Metas, the LinkedIns, the Google Ads, all that sort of stuff, use that as secondary ancillary data to feed your CRM, essentially. Then from a strategic perspective of like, hey, what channel should I run at all? We typically go from use the channel for what it's best used for. If you're advertising on Google or Google search specifically, like you want your right keywords because people are searching X phrase or X compound keyword. If you're using LinkedIn, it's for tofu and mofu ads because people don't buy as much on LinkedIn anymore. It's more of like a research Same thing with the LLMs. You want to make sure that you are using the right prompts or tracking the right prompts so that the LLMs see your brand correctly. And so you don't want every channel to do everything. You want each channel to do what it does best, essentially, from a
Okay.
strategic
Okay.
planning perspective.
That makes sense. So what you're saying is really, let's kind of backtrack almost and reverse backwards, and let's take a look at the numbers in the CRM first and foremost. Let's into the data, and it's always difficult because a lot of our client CRMs are messy, and there's not as much that we can do there. But that does seem to be the best source of truth, as long as they can get it into a good enough place, and then from there we can make those data-driven decisions. We can invest more into SEO, we can invest more into paid search, etc. So yeah, all of that makes sense. I want to chime in a little bit on something you mentioned a little bit about working with cross-functional teams. So tell me about, obviously you're the data wizard on our team, the de facto data wizard,
Right.
data janitor, whatever you want to call yourself.
That's my little plaque here.
Spreadsheet guru. Yep. Yep. So talk to me about, obviously you are very in the know in terms of analytics, in terms of tracking, in terms of really digging into the numbers and making very important business driven, efficient decisions. Talk to me a little bit about how you work with our creative team internally, clients' creative team, demand gen teams, even sometimes, we work with product teams as well. Talk to me a little bit about the best use cases of how you've seen, internal alignment between these teams so that not everyone is necessarily working in silos. They still can be, but everyone is really working towards the same goal and the same, kind of cohesion.
Right. So obviously I'm the analytics attribution tracking person. So I see the world and I see marketing through that lens. And to me, these numbers tell a story. So first and foremost, I got to make sure that my numbers are right, that the data pipes are working so that numbers actually appear. But after I have those numbers, they tell a story. If your impression volume is low, if your engagement is high, if your conversions are expensive, those all say to me, hey, something's moving here, and I can determine and diagnose the problem so that we can improve on it. Then I have to translate that to the appropriate person. If I'm talking to a media buyer, I can say like, hey, look at these numbers, make sure that your cost per whatever is efficient, tracking down, whatever. If I'm talking to a creative person, I'm saying, hey, creative person, look at these engagement numbers. This is what they mean. People aren't watching your video, or people are clicking on A ad instead of B ad, or people are buying off of this carousel you made. Like, good job. Great. If I'm talking to a brand, we need to talk about sales and filter everything through a revenue kind of lens. And so it really depends on who I'm talking to, but I want to make sure that I'm translating and speaking their language with the numbers that I have at hand.
So, obviously you lead with a very analytics first mindset, which is very valuable for really any business that's trying to do marketing and promotion. Talk to me about the other side a little bit. Let's flip the roles a little bit and talk to me about how you work with a creative team from another company that says, hey, we have a new blog post that we'd love you guys to promote, or we have a new ebook, or a sales team, who we often work with and are getting feedback from. Tell me about that loop, as well as how you take their feedback and again, kind of filter it through and work together as a team to create that, cohesion.
Okay, so if I were to summarize your question, it's essentially pleasing different departments, trying to get their goals done, and then, still doing well by the brand and making sure that we're increasing sales, keep maintaining sales, all that sort of stuff. Often when I'm working with creative folk, the vibe, sorry to stereotype you creative folk, the vibe that I get from creative people is like new, exciting, beautiful, show-stopping, tell a story, that sort of stuff. When I'm talking to salespeople and VPs, directors, they want, where's the cash? Like, make sure that the bar is going up and to the right. And I have to balance that with the numbers that I see. And so I think that it's a pretty age-old question of how do we leave room for creativity while still generating sales and continuing to support revenue driving activities. So tried and true or like new and improved, which is kind of an oxymoron,
Right.
I guess. A little bit of a tangent. There's a book that I read by Esther Perel. She is a relationship coach and she writes relationships that don't evolve, fossilize and die. And if you're always doing historical, tried and true, it's worked in the past sort of methodology, eventually burn out because no one cares anymore. If you do too new, kind of bleeding edge sort of story, branding, that sort of stuff, then it's too chaotic. Like people are unsure of what's happening and it's pretty risky. It's very chaotic and people are on edge because of that. I like to go back to 80-20. 80% tried and true. Like this has worked in the past. Let's do it. 20% innovate, new, let's change it up and let's run a test. And the numbers should speak for themselves. Either one or the other is going to work well, or no relationship at all, or your new creative sucks and you should go back to the old ones. So 80-20, historical and new, and let the numbers speak for themselves.
Cool. Kind of leads us into another, kind of like two offset questions off of that I have for you is one, like talk to me about like timelines, like when in your opinion is like a good timeline to test. Like obviously every B2B brand is like a little bit different. And so does that depend on how many competitors they have in their industry? Does that depend on the budget? Tell me a little bit about the time frame.
Yeah. So budget permitting and I guess egos of leadership permitting, I typically see that in general, B2B brands kind of have a wave that looks exactly like this in the year. There's like a general seasonality with B2B brands. So like at the beginning of the year, if your fiscal starts in January, your budgets renew and you want to explore and you want to like do all your stuff. Then there's a tiny dip in spring when, you've picked a vendor, you've picked a product, and you're good. Summer comes around, you're probably getting more increased customers. There's a lot of activity. And then the holidays rolls around and it's like pretty much dead. And so this general shape is like the seasonality of most B2B brands that we work with. And I think that your risk tolerance of when you should attack with new creative or use historical creative should follow that line. Like you want to come out with something new really strong at the beginning of the year, maybe that's the best way to do it. Maybe you're a little bit less risk taking, do it at the second hump in the summer. Or you just like, you kind of want to whisper your new thing and do it in Q4. So I like to put it in two perspectives here. One is the CMO, the VPs, the directors that are looking at the bottom of the funnel, which is marketing qualified leads, sale qualified leads, customers, purchases, return on ad spend, that sort of stuff. Like all the way at the very bottom, that is what they typically care about. But as consumers, and even us, we buy stuff, we search for new vendors all the time and that sort of stuff. We know that it's a funnel. You have to get enough people at the top to then know more about your brand, to go to your website, to book a call. And so all of the typical funnel activities that we measure from a holistic digital marketing perspective. When we are too bottom of the funnel focused, your pipeline turns into a straw. And so you can't really get enough sales if you don't have enough leads, if you don't have enough clicks, if you don't have enough landing page views, if you don't have enough engagement, if you don't have enough impressions. So like building back up and making sure that your funnel is wide at the top so that people are able to drift into the middle and bottom of the funnel is the common issue that I see with B2B marketers and B2B CMOs.
So how are, we're taking all of these top of funnel and middle of funnel folks, and attribution nowadays is much harder to measure. And so, beyond even omni-channel of taking someone who saw a Facebook ad and plugging them into an Instagram retargeting ad, That might not be the best example because it's the same platform, but you get what I'm trying to, like taking someone from a LinkedIn ad and then flowing them into a Google ad, bottom of funnel. Obviously attribution is super difficult nowadays. Even for one signal channel, it's difficult to even funnel people through to the bottom of the funnel. How do you not only inspire confidence in the brand and maybe their CMO, their senior leadership team, that this is the right path and the numbers that we're seeing are in fact accurate and we should double or triple down here?
In the past, we used to have cookie tracking and everything kind of was more on the side of digital marketers so that we can track our consumers, we can like log them, we can optimize towards all of them, etc. And so I often saw customers as going to all of these different properties. So maybe you found me on Facebook and you went to my website, you read something. I tracked you later on LinkedIn and followed you around. Maybe you went to our blog once, and because of all of these numbers and cookies that I've left on you, I can like gradually bring you back so that you book a call and you buy something from us. That used to be the world of digital marketing, with privacy laws, cookies being disabled, mobile and the iOS 14 update just canceling a lot of tracking with a lot of our ad platforms. That's no longer the case. And so we are flying somewhat more blind as digital marketers. And so we want to, let's say, Adam is in this funnel for a B2B brand. We want to say like, hey, Adam saw our ad on Facebook, and then he went to our blog, and then Adam saw our LinkedIn ad, and then he got retargeted with this thing, and then he looked for us in an LLM, and then he booked a call, he ditched the call, he booked it again, and then he became a customer and all that stuff. You can see like Adam throughout this entire line. That's not the case anymore. Now we have user 1234 who did something on Facebook, and then we have like Adam who bought something at the bottom. We can't necessarily track between platforms and between the funnel of like user 1234 is Adam Yaeger. So we have to like take a step back and view them as like holistic numbers. So how many users and then how many purchases have you gotten? And you can no longer track like one instance or one customer anymore. You have to zoom out and like bucket them into these different groups and making sure that your funnel is slick enough to drag people down each step.
And how do you educate CMOs about that? It's obviously due to like a variety of different reasons, but how do you educate, senior leadership who isn't, as in the weeds about?
So typically when we're talking to CMOs, I want to make sure that their CRM is as data loaded, I guess, or as clean as it can be, because we want to make sure that that platform is the source of truth. When we talk to CMOs, as I previously said before, we want to make sure that their CRM is as clean and as filled with good and insightful data as we can. Because all the other platforms out there that we want to like loop in and track and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff, I don't trust them, essentially. And so if a CMO has grown up or has gone into their job, I guess, as a marketer in the 2000s to 2010s, hopefully they're on top of their stuff to know that like this cookie, no privacy, track everybody kind of landscape, that doesn't exist anymore. And so we need to use other methodologies in order to make sure that we can see as much as we can without breaking laws and still make informed decisions from those data points. It's a balancing act.
Yeah, and I feel like it's difficult too for a lot of marketing teams, like agencies in particular, because we might be undercounted for performance gains that were unrealized, right? Because of those attribution, challenges. So yeah, it's a tricky landscape to navigate. Walk me through how or when you decide to pursue efficiency, when you decide to pursue to scale, and how business maturity might affect that decision.
So I typically look at it as a checklist. And the first step on that checklist is, are you getting any leads? And so hopefully you're getting some. If you are getting leads, then are you getting good data on those leads? Are you getting first name, last name, company name, email address, all the things that say, hey, this is like a true lead, not a bot, not outside of our TAM. Is that the right acronym?
Total addressable market. Yep.
Yeah. Is it within the scope of who is actually our customer? That is like the second step. And then the third step is get that number as high as possible and your cost per lead down. So let's say we've been working together for a very long time or at least a year, and we see that our lead numbers are going up and up and up. We've already subtracted all of our bots, all of the people that are outside of our market, and we're stagnating. Cool. And so that's when we start to delve deeper into the numbers and say, like, hey, how can we improve here? Because often there is a lever that we can pull between number of leads and quality of leads. So we need to start lead scoring our leads that we have. First, make sure you have a lot of leads, then qualify the leads within it, and we can start to branch off into a quantity driven campaign and a quality driven campaign. And then let's just pit them against each other, because it might take a campaign or two to determine which strategy makes the most sense for your brand. Maybe your targeting is too tight and you're not, it's too expensive to reach a highly qualified lead. Or the opposite, like, hey, your leads are, you have a lot of leads, you have some volume, and they're relatively inexpensive. So maybe it's worth it to just wade through the bots and the inaccurate.
What you're saying essentially is there's a way to further qualify, obviously, and you could, your sales team can qualify any one number of leads, but it might be beneficial to even start a little bit more broad up until a certain extent, because some of those leads might actually be, beneficial, or they might be referrals to your perfect lead.
At the end of the day, I think the steps are: one, is your data tracking enough so that you are getting leads? Two, is the lead volume high enough so that you can make a determining decision on to bifurcate quality versus quantity? And then three, run a test campaign for each and see if the cost per lead is effective in one of the two strategies. You could run into an issue where high quantity, low quality is fine, because it's worth it because the cost per lead is so efficient, versus paying a lot more for a quality lead, but knowing that your costs are going to kind of go up. There's a lot of factors here, but I think that it's worth pitting them against each other and just running a test.
Yeah, and speaking from experience too, like, I know in particular, thinking of some client examples in the past that we've helped with, it's always a struggle of like, do we want to get CPL as low as possible, or do we want the quantity to be as high as possible?
Yeah.
And it's always a push and pull. I feel like it's always a conversation between our team and their team, what that pressure point is, right? What is kind of that peak performance look like? And even beyond that, it could even be seasonal as well, depending on your industry. But yeah, really interesting stuff. And then last question I kind of wanted to jump into was, where are buyer decisions actually happening nowadays? Obviously we have all of these different channels, and there are a lot of different avenues that buyers go for, to look for reviews, to look for product features, to their own website, right? Stuff like that. But where would you say the channels that buyers are making decisions in the B2B landscape happening? And obviously this is dependent on, client industry. Even beyond that, it could even be seasonal as well, depending on your industry. But yeah, really interesting stuff. And then last question I kind of wanted to jump into, where are buyer decisions actually happening nowadays? Obviously we have all of these different channels nowadays, and there are a lot of different avenues that buyers go for, to look for reviews, to look for product features, to their own website, right? Stuff like that. But where would you say the channels that buyers are making decisions in the B2B landscape happening?
Okay. So I think that organic search and paid search are still very strong these days.
Okay. Yep.
We're only talking bottom of the funnel here, okay? So all your tofu and mofu channels that I said you should prioritize and don't forget about them, like, let's just put them off to the side for a second. But at the bottom of the funnel, like what's getting your customer to the last step of like, hey, I want to buy, hey, I want to talk to you, hey, I want to have a call or a meeting. These are the channels that I think bring them there. So let's just say search in general, organic search, so SEM, SEO, and paid search working together. So both of those. I say that's one channel. Second is like review sites. So you got your clutches, you got your G2s, you got your all of those Capterras. Those are a second channel that I think are worth investing in. And the third is LLMs or AI SEO. This is kind of tied together with like traditional SEO. But nowadays, a lot of consumers are just asking ChatGPT or Gemini. So I think those are three channels that are like up and coming, a mixture of tried and true and up and coming that get people to the last leg of the decision making process. If your budget is low, I think then we got to think about your industry. We got to think about your consumer. If we focus too heavily on the channels themselves, we could get into a whole rabbit hole of like, what generally works well. I'd rather tackle the question like what works well for you and your consumers. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%. I think I have one kind of in addition channel, or if we're talking about top three, I'd probably even boot one of the ones that you said is email, right?
Yes,
Email is still, it's boring, but email marketing, it still
totally.
works. It still works really well. A lot of the rules surrounding email has changed, similar to the data privacy rules in paid social and paid search, right? But email, and it kind of goes back to your CRM and how cleaned up it is and all that good stuff. But email is still tried and true,
Fair.
especially if you have a solid, foundational email list. That's going to get you pretty good engagement, whatever you're looking for. If it's a webinar registration, if it's a email nurture, if it's, a straight to sales demo type of email to set up that demo call, I would say email is probably in that top three for me, in terms of what channels B2B brands should be on for, the most conversion driving
Yeah.
actions. And then one honorable mention would be kind of in that direct buy category, not necessarily review sites like Clutch or Capterra or G2, but more so industry publications. Like they might be like niche industry publications. So, for instance, we work with a lot of healthcare clients. And so they might be well suited for a very well-known healthcare publication that has very solid readership numbers, stuff like that. So I think it's more of like a case by case basis.
Maybe 5 years ago, and I'm sure this is a hot take, I guess more tech driven side of the digital marketing agency, but programmatic used to be super hot. And I think that it's still super hot these days. I'm counterculture to that. And you know how much I hate like programmatic buys, but I see the shift going back the other way. Like in the 2000s, like people were buying all of those publisher direct buys, and the media plans, the digital media plans when I used to work at Starcom were like hundreds or like let's 50 lines long because each publication used to have its own line. And then we went into the ad network days where they grouped them together and you could just buy an ad network. And then we went one step further and then we did like programmatic and you could target the audience with like a variety of sites, whatever. I think that we're actually making a go back to basics shift, in addition to programmatic being very like wonky and hard to track, the ad inventory being like super random and kind of disruptive, and the tracking and privacy laws just kicking in and making sure we can't see the entire funnel. We're going back to basics. We're going back to the 2000s, baby, the golden years of like publisher direct buys. And I think that's actually a good move. So if we were to boil it down to CMO at generic B2B brand, our LRG recommendation would be publisher direct buys, traditional SEO and paid search, email marketing, AI SEO/geo, making a go back to basics shift, in addition to programmatic being very like, and then just very healthy CRM clean tracking right at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, That's a good point. Like that's not necessarily even a channel, but that's super duper important for actually, data hygiene and making sure that the data we're actually looking at is valuable data to even work off of. That's could be a whole podcast in and of itself of how to clean up your CRM. Maybe that's the next episode. We have a CRM expert on.
How do you make it like not tech jargon and not boring, I guess, for the normal VP or CMO? That stuff is dummy thick.
Yeah. Well, it's also the issue of like a lot of CRMs nowadays, like HubSpot's like a perfect example.
Yeah.
HubSpot is trying to be Salesforce nowadays. They're trying to have 1,000 different features. And so if the salespeople can't even use it, then how do you expect a CMO to even view, a very simplified dashboard? That's probably a whole topic in and of itself, but it's how do you make it usable and clean and insightful? Could be a whole podcast in and of itself of how to clean up your CRM.
Easy design is useful for like marketers or digital B2B marketers, because not everybody's a coder, not everybody's a developer, not everybody's like a attribution person, but like maybe these days you kind of need to know a little bit because the platforms are making it so difficult for the sales focus or the less tech savvy marketer to even read and understand or set up these systems.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks so much for joining, Dom. Really appreciated your insight. Love chatting as always. Hopefully you found this helpful and tune in for the next episode of Lead Gen in the Wild.
Ciao.